It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Sharma, who is the former director of School of Translation Studies and Training, IGNOU, and an institution known worldwide for offering high-quality teaching through the open and distant learning mode, and like NTM, helping in building an inclusive knowledge society through education. He joined School of Translation Studies and Training as reader in 2009 and was the director from 2017 to 2020. He has designed, developed, and coordinated MA Translation Studies program, MPhil, and PhD programs. Apart from this, he has also served All India Radio as a broadcaster and administrator for 11 years. His area of specializations are Sanskrit, translation studies, translation theories and practice, officialities, media and culture in translation and distant education. He has translated Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal, Bihar and National Hindi volumes of PLSI under Bhasha Research Foundation, translated and vetted gender education modules, People, History and Culture of Northeast India volume and India, Unity in Diversity. Coordinated major translation projects of FSSAI English volumes into 11 Indian languages. He has also recorded more than 100 video lessons on translation studies for IGNOU MA Translation Studies programs. I welcome you, sir. We look forward for a very encouraging session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm humbled by your kind words. And also, I am really obliged and honored to be with all our participants and my esteemed colleagues from NTM. So I would like to express my gratitude to the authorities of NTM and also do like to express my welcome to the dignitaries with us in this program, our colleagues from NTM and participants. My topic which we will be talking about is the vetting of translation. But before that, I would like to mention that the vetting is an area of translation which is often neglected, and the translated text or the text that we create after translation sometimes do not serve the purpose as it is intended to. Therefore, I thought to talk about a specific area of translation, especially in the process of translation. Before that, I would also like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this 2-week-long translation training program through the online mode for women translators to have chosen a very, very appropriate and timely subject for helping our translators, especially women translators, to dwell and also understand the different aspects of translation through various interaction sessions in which I have been going through the sessions, the details that I do monitor everyday sessions, and I find that there are most of our speakers, the experts, have wide and varied experience in the respective areas. So I once again express my thanks and gratitude to the organizers, to the NTM authorities, and also to the colleagues who have been working very hard and also striving to make the program a real success. As my colleague has just now mentioned, organizing such a program is not an easy task. Therefore, I compliment them, and with these words, I would like to proceed to my topic. So, dear participants, I am sure most of you are aware about the process of the translation, process of the translation act as such. I think you are aware that the translation is not an act, just an act. It is a process, it is a product, it involves whole lot of activities, it involves whole range of different acts which do not come into the picture when we create target text. But often the translators have to really grapple with lot of issues. So I thought to make my presentation's objectives clear, I have put in on the slides that what you will be able to gather. I'm not very sure, and I do not also expect that that whatever discussion we have in this session will definitely make you understand the topic. But I am sure that some points will be there to gather, and then perhaps later on to ponder upon. And as translators, I think you will surely take note of this discussion, and then you will yourself analyze why vetting is an important area in the process of translation. So I intend to bring the points into discussion that translation is a multi-staged process. Translation is not something like creative writings or any other act that you simply sit and ponder upon and then you create something. But translator has to do a lot of preparation, lot of grappling with the source text, lot of resources are needed, backup knowledge is required, and then the translator goes through different processes. He sees the text, reads it, then try to find out what the original author or the text tried to say, and also then find out the equivalents, how to situate them into the target culture, target language, and whole sort of things. And like there's an important essay citing translation. It's a very interesting essay, and it says how to cite the source text or the intended meaning of the source text into the target text. So I am sure that you will understand through the discussion that translation is not a one simple act, but it is an act which involves a lot of processes, lot of stages. Then I would also like to discuss in this discussion, the presentation, that translation is not complete until and unless the process of vetting has been completed. So we all talk about vetting, sometimes we talk about a review, sometimes we mention about the evaluation, but they are seemingly overlapping one another. But when we come into the deeper discussion on these three issues, which is vetting, review, and evaluation, then we come to know that while vetting is a process which is the process that takes place during the act of translation itself, whereas the review and the evaluation is a post-publishing activities. So I would like to mention that vetting, review, and evaluations are different stages in translation, and their purpose is also different. So we'll discuss it in a while. Then I would also like to share with our participants. Please do not take it as a final word from me, but as a practitioner of translation, I would like to say that vetting is a mandatory process, mandatory stage in the translation, and only the translation comes to the stage of completion when the vetting has been done. So why it is important, we will discuss. Then one very important statement which is often made, that whether the translator text or the translation is a final product, is an ideal product or a perfect text or a perfect version of the source text or not. So there has not been consensus on the issue, but nobody has claimed that my translation is final and my translation is perfect. Reason being that the act of translation involves two different languages, language structures, and behind the languages there remains a whole lot of culture and many other innumerable issues. And when a translator negotiates between the two, definitely something remains which is not fully expressed or fully translated or taken across into the target language culture or target language sphere. So I think no translator, as I understand, is can claim that my translation is final or my translation is the perfect. Of course, one tries to bring as much as closer to the source text, the reader of the target text, but definitely it cannot be claimed that the translation or the translator text or the created text is final. So now we will move ahead, and then we will come to the main or the core issue of our discussion, because vetting, we are talking about vetting of translation. So the previous slides, please. So I would like to make a couple of statements here which have been there, and these are intended to clarify what translation is. Translation is nothing but a communication between source language and target language. There has been a lot of definitions about the translation, but this statement is a general one, that after all, what is our intention? Our intention is not to put the entire culture, the entire scenario into the target language. Of course, one tries to the level of perfection, but it doesn't happen. But the basic objective of the translation is to communicate. It is to communicate. I mean, what is to communicate? To communicate the intention, the idea, the message, the content of the source language into the target language. So a lot of definitions will give more deeper understanding, but a general view about translation is that it is a communication. Essentially, it is a communication. It's a correspondence between the source language and the target source text and the target text, or the source language or the target language. Or we can say that between the author of the source text and the reader of the created text or the new text or the target text. So it's a correspondence, because with the process of translation, we find or we bring home a lot of things which are not with us previously till we had read the translated text or the new text which has been created through the process of translation. Dear participants, what is our objective? Why do we? What do we do? So we render the source language text into the target language or from one language to another. So what do? We transmit the message or meaning or the intent of the source language into the target language. Of course, our symbols are different except for oral translation or the interpretation. But if we talk about the translation proper, definitely we have a pair of languages. Therefore, we transmit the message, meaning, or the intent between the source language and the target language. Some people say that during the act of translation, a lot of manipulation takes place. There has been a lot of discussion on this. Some people have called the translator the traitor, the manipulator, many names they have called the translators with. But definitely, a translator is an interpreter, because you will agree, as professional translators, and I'm sure most of you are doing translation. So during the process of translation, you might have come across certain issues, certain situations where the source text itself is not very clear, or perhaps bringing it into the target language culture, or the act of situating it is not that easy. It's not easy to situate the source language text, or its meaning and intent into the target language culture. It's both its linguistic culture as well as the social culture. So the translator then tries to interpret, tries to devise a mechanism how to communicate. So sometimes he gives the explanation, sometimes adds footnotes, sometimes gives a kind of near one expressions which are there available in the target language. All of us understand the Indian contexts, and there are a lot of Indian expressions, lot of terms, kinship terms, day-to-day practice terms, which do not have the equivalents in many other languages. Say, for example, one common dahi. So we dahi, chach, paratha, chapati, or lot of Indian food items are there, which we do not find equivalents to express them in other languages. So what we try, for dosa we say it is a pancake, but definitely it is not exactly a pancake. But then what option the translator has? So the translator interprets the things, keeping in view the culture, the linguistic and social culture of the target language, and then devise a mechanism whether to complement it, or to footnote it, or to give a near one which is available in the target language, target culture, and then a kind of similarity is brought so that there is an understanding. Mind you that translation is not for a person who understands the source language. Translation is always for a person or the reader who is not acquainted with the source language. So therefore, the primary concern is to communicate, to make an understanding between the source language text and the target language text, or we can say the source author and the target uh, text reader. So the last point which I would like to make here, which is very, very important for our colleagues and the colleagues in terms of participants, I'm sure most of you are very highly placed in doing a lot of translation. So you are obviously participants here, but I would refer you as colleagues, so that is more convenient for me. I would like to say that the translation is an act which is a commissioned activity. Why I'm saying commissioned activity? I think if you go through the Scopus, principal Scopus theory, then it explains that why the translation is a commissioned activity. It also says that translation is an act with a purpose. As I mentioned, that translation is not act. Usually, I mean, mostly it is not act with a choice, but it is an act with a purpose. Choice is there to do translation or not, but as long as the source text is there, there has to be a translation of it, and therefore, in that term, it is not a choice, but it is a necessity. So, translation act is different from the creative writing. As I mentioned, that translation is an act with a purpose. So if there is a purpose, there has to be some kind of condition to it. So translation is an act which is known as commission activity. Lot of commissioning activities, lot of commissioning issues are there. Why the translation is to be done? What is the purpose of the translation? Who is the intended reader of the translation? What will be the time duration? What are the other terms and conditions? If you look at the translation process in the medieval age and the Mughal period, there has been translations which were which were organized under the royal patronage or the Shahi Farman. And then there were instructions as to how to do the translation. If you look at the Chinese translation, those were group translations. And there you will also find that behind that there is a certain ideology which works. So it is, so that is how it is known as act. Translation is also called an activity which is commissioned. There are certain issues with translation. I am coming to vetting, but before that I would like to make a background so that you understand why translation, the translation process ends with vetting. There has been theoretical approaches. Very many people have explained what translation is and what happens during the process of translation. So, like Naida has said, that translation consists in reproducing the closest natural equivalent of source language message, first in terms of meaning and then in style. But then there's another very important translation scholar who says replacement of textual material in one language, which is source language, by equivalent textual material in another language, that is target language. This principle is also known as shift theory. So it's a shifting of the source, the textual material of the source language by the equivalent textual material in the target language, which is another language. Basically, what happens? Conversion of text from one language into another as both science and art. There is an issue in translation whether translation is a science, it is an art, or it is a craft, what it is. So it is all, I think ultimately all of us understand. But a very important statement about the translation is that performance of the same function in target language as in the source language. This is a very, very important statement in my view. Why it is important that if our target language, the text which is created in the target language, is not able to function in the same way as it was functioning in the source language, then our endeavor perhaps is not fulfilled. So the acceptable translation is which functions in the same way, or it performs the same function in the target language as it was performing in the source language. So these were just few parts of the theories which have very long deliberations by the different scholars. But I have just mentioned them briefly so that we understand what happens. What do we do? We like the Naida's theory is a equivalent or the dynamic equivalent theory. So it says what do? You try to reproduce closest natural equivalents. Closest natural equivalents. It's not natural equivalent. It is not equivalence. It is closest natural. So it's I mentioned earlier that no translation is perfect or final. So that is how such terms are used, because translation theories have largely evolved from translation practice. So these important, very celebrity scholars have, those who were also prolific translators, they have done a lot of translation and then come to the understanding that it's not possible to make a perfect translation. So the word is closest, used very with a very specific purpose, that what you can do, you can come to the most closest point, but perhaps you will not 100% replace the source language text by in this target language, because which is not possible. So I think we can move to the next slide, please. Now I come to the main important point of discussion, vetting. The background which I gave will, it's a kind of setting, what happens in the translation and why do we need vetting. I am talking a lot about that no translation is final or perfect. So we will come now, we will deal with that in terms of vetting, what vetting does, and whether after vetting the translation can be claimed as final or perfect or not. and if it is so, then why there are other two stages, which are review and evaluation. So I'll first begin with the vetting. I'm sure if our participants have any question, we will discuss it towards the end of the presentation, maybe in
Yes, sir.
5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
But in case you find some very important issue during this, you can interrupt me. I don't mind it. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
yes.
Okay. Vanita is also there. She has been a student of MA in Translation Studies. Vanita, welcome.
Yes, sir. Very happy to see you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we all know that translation is both process and product. I'm sure this phrase is not very difficult to understand, that translation is both process and product. Process, it in terms of it is called process because in translation, if one see what are the different stages in translation, what are the different activities in translation, then one can easily understand that there are a couple of lot many processes, lot many stages in translation, and therefore it is a translation is an activity which is a process. But at the same time, it's a product. Product, it is in terms that we end up creating a new text. New text, I'm not talking about that it's alien from the source text, but definitely it is a text which is supposedly well homogenized and situated in the target language, culture, and the linguistic culture and the social culture. What I'm trying to say through these two terms, linguistic culture and the social culture, is that if we translate some text into another language, then first of all, it has to be well adjusted, well expressed through the target language, its grammar, its diction, its syntax, and so forth, whatever its grammatical categories and the linguistic aspects are. So it has to be well fitted into the target language structure, linguistic structure. But at the same time, it is very, very important that our translation should conform to the ethos and values of the target language social culture. I'm using the word social culture deliberately because we know that sometimes we find the words which have the dictionary meaning given, but when we use them, they are not acceptable in the target language culture. So in that situation, the translator text fails to serve the purpose for which it was done. It is very important that even though the text may seemingly be conforming to the grammatical or the dictionary or the other linguistic norms, but it may not be acceptable socially. If I may give some example, like there are a lot of words which are used in some areas which are not accepted for the same meaning, though they are when they are translated literally, and then the translator tries to put them into the target text, but they socially not accepted. There are a lot of words, chora, chori, like this. So these are not accepted in all areas in the same, though meaning is same, but they are not accepted because these terms sometimes are treated as slangs. So we have to be very, very careful because all of us know the words are very sensitive. They can create a very either if used carefully, a very positive impact, but if not used carefully, maybe very, very different or unsavory impact can be created. So the translator has to be very careful while using the terms, and one should not simply stick to the dictionary equivalents, dictionary terms, but they see that those are socially accepted. Second point is vetting. Vetting, I didn't give its literal meaning here, but while you will come to the statement also, it's a careful examination of something. Vetting is a careful examination of something. Something here we mean by the translated text, if we talk about this in terms of translation. So when we carefully examine the translated text, that means we examine it linguistically and socially, culturally. That means that we are doing the vetting. So what happens if I come to the previous statement that translation is both process and product? So then process, what we commonly, because there are a lot of scholars who have given different processes, but generally all agree that there are 3 to 4 stages which happens in the process of translation. That is analysis or the reading of the target text, source text, then the transfer, then reorganization. So that means Vishleshan, Antran, and Punargathan. But the act of vetting happens after these 3 stages. Then what is vetting? Vetting, as I mentioned, it's a re-looking or a deeper look, or rather I should say critical examination of the translated text. I'm saying it translated text, not the text which has been published or which has been put into public domain. I'm talking here about the translated text before the process of publishing the translation or putting it into the public domain. So what happens during the process of vetting? Vetting is an improvement in the translated text at 2 stages. Improvement happens in the translated text at 2 stages. One improvement is during the translation and another is the post-publishing. So post-publishing is evaluation. We'll come to that in a little while. So this is the final stage of the translation act itself. So till the vetting has taken place, the translation process is not complete. So it is the vetting is called a final stage of translation activity. So vetting is improvement for translation. For translation, it is an improvement. That means until and unless you do you complete the stage of vetting, the translation activity is not final. So it's a relook. Relooking means you have translated the text, but you are required to relook it. Relook for what? We will come into this point in a while, but just like to mention here that relook for certain gaps, certain missing parts, certain expressions which may not conform to the social culture of the target language, and so forth. So whereas I will make a comparison of the vetting and evaluation here for a moment. While vetting is the final stage of translation, evaluation is a post-publishing stage of translation. That means when the translation has been published, published means it is treated, officially declared as final, or it is published, or it is put into public domain. Then when the text is received from functional approach, then we call it is under the process of evaluation. But evaluation is not the process which takes place before the text is published. So what we have to differentiate here is that vetting is an important stage of translation, because translation is going to be published as soon as the vetting process is completed. Evaluation may or may not happen. It may happen, it may not happen, because evaluation is essentially a quality assessment process, whether the product is quality product or not. All of us know that product is product. Once a product is made, it may be quality or it may lack the required quality. That's another issue, but product is there. So we should be very careful that our product is as per the norms. And what is our product? Translated text. So translated text needs the process of vetting as a mandatory process, but evaluation takes place post publishing when it is in public domain, and it is only to assess it from the quality point of view. Quality point of view.
Yes.
What? Yeah, please. Okay, so what is the quality concern? Authenticity, purpose, whether it is whether it can be treated as authoritative equivalent text or not, or whether it serves the purpose which it was intended to, or whether it is useful or not, or whether it can be applicable to the areas for which the translator text has been created. So let us not mix to vetting and evaluation. Evaluation is a quality assessment activity, and vetting is a mandatory activity as the final stage of the Translation Act. So kindly, we can move ahead. There are certain issues there with the Translation Act and in view of the vetting. As I mentioned, translation is an act with a purpose. It is very important that we cannot leave the translated text as a text which nobody is responsible for, because once the process of vetting is completed, it is treated as an act. It is treated as a product which is to be put into the practice or put into the use. That means we will not wait for the evaluation or the review, but we will go to our purpose, to our use of translation for which it was intended. So therefore, it is an act with a purpose. So it starts with the very specific object. So once the translation is completed, vetting happens, but evaluation is not at this point coming into picture there. So before that, when the text is applied for its or put into use, that means put into the purpose for which it was created. Before that, the vetting is completed. It's a multi-stage process. Bathgate has placed it in the 6th stage, and he has called it's a re-looking process, Punarablokan Charan. As I mentioned, vetting is not a fault-finding activity. So we have to understand that vetting is not a fault-finding activity. Vetting is an activity which is for the improvement of the translation. Translator and vetter are different but complementing each other. One should know that the vetters should not consider that he or she is superior to the translator. In fact, the vector is supposed to see that whether there are certain gaps, there are factual mistakes or factual errors, or whether the translated text is able to serve the same purpose as it was serving in the source language text. So these two are very important people here, translator and the vector, but they are not with the different purposes or with different objectives. Their objective is one, to make a translation which is perfect, which is to the most nearer to the source language text, and also able to serve the purpose. The language of the translator text is standard, hence vetting. This is very important statement. Why vetting is required? Because when the translator translates the source language text, sometimes there's a deviation in the standard of the source language text, and it ends slightly, sometimes a higher standard, sometimes a lower standard, and sometimes it do not conform to the standard or the parameters which are followed in the source language text, because one thing which we have to remember is that the author of the source text is always he is free to use, he or she is free to write the way one likes to. Therefore, the no criteria can be applied on the source language text creator. But this criteria of standard can be very well implied, very well used on the translated text, because the translated text should not undermine the dignity of the source language author. This is very important, because if the standard is not up to the mark, then the source language author is feels maybe let down, or sort of not given the due respect. But if it is too complex, too critical, or too difficult to understand by the readers, still it doesn't serve the purpose. So the vector has to see that whatever standard of the language was used by the source language author, that should be closest, that should be of the same standard in the target language text which is created, which is a targeted text, or which is a new text created by the translator. Collective method of translation is ideal for knowledge text translation, and so is vetting. This is another point. Sometimes what we think is that anybody can be a vetter, or anybody the vetters and the translators are two different people. Of course, if for the knowledge text, collective translation method is ideal. Similarly, we also understand that the vetting process should also be done by two people. One is the language expert, and another one is the expert in a respective domain, because we know that in the knowledge text translation, there is a very varied area of knowledge texts, and one vetter cannot do justice. If someone is good in humanities, may not be very good in the science subjects, or the technological subjects, or the management. Therefore, there must be, if it is possible, a team of vetters, who one is language expert, another one is the domain knowledge expert, then perhaps we can end with a better text in the target language. Creative text needs freedom but demands demarcation. This is a statement which I devised because I read about somewhere that while the creative text should not be confined to the normal parameters of translation activity, the translator is free to take liberty, and then does some bhavatmak anvad, or emotive translation, or the sense translation, freeing himself or herself from the literal translation. Or sometimes maybe both strategies are required. But what I'm trying to say here, that how much liberty should be taken, that should be well defined. Who will define it? Who will see that whether the liberty taken was essentially required, or there has been too much liberty taken by the translator? So good vetting should see that the liberty taken by the translator to translate the creative text is within the limits, so that the reader is not devoid of the taste, the aesthetics of the source text which was translated in the target language. So this I meant by saying that creative text needs freedom. Of course, definitely it needs freedom, but then one should also know what are the limits, what should be the limit of or what should be the extent of the freedom which is to be taken. And then a good vetter will see that whether the translator is too liberal, or whether it is deviated from the source language, or the good vetter must see this, and if it is possible that it can be discussed with the source language, the original creator, and also the translator, then a good translation can be achieved. So we can move ahead to the next slide, please. The There are few more issues with respect to vetting. Vetting of translation functions both in domain and linguistic sphere. As I mentioned, that in terms of the knowledge text translation, same is with the literary translation, because we all know that the language and the domain knowledge, these are two different areas. So therefore, it would be in the interest of a good translation or in the activity of the translation that we consider both the areas separately, linguistic sphere as well as the domain area or specific the specificity of the knowledge which is embedded in the literature of pertaining to a specific area of knowledge. Then we need one expert from domain area, another from the language area. Why I'm saying is the language. We as domain, of course, we know that not all the vetters will be proficient in all the knowledge domains. But what do we mean by language? And then I use the word presentation. I'm using the word presentation because, say, for example, if it is a fiction, it's a science writing, it is a scientific texts which have been translated, then the translator has to be very careful who is the reader, whether it is a journal reader, whether it is a scientists community, or it is meant for the school children or the small children. So the presentation part is very important. So a good vetter will see that the knowledge which is in the text which is translated from the source language is presented in a manner which is acceptable or which is comprehensible to the target reader. So we have to make the presentation of the text according to the reader's level, whether it is for scientific community, for the textbooks, or for the children reading. So that part is very important. A good vetter will see that and point it out. There are two stages of vetting. The purpose is to keeping the ideas, intent, and style in the target text intact. This I meant kept with a specific purpose that sometimes what happens, we will come to what do we mean by ideas, because the vetting is at two different stages. So style is very important. Sometimes we know that in Indian numeral styles, we try to use the Devanagari numerals in place of the Roman numerals. So we have to see that the source language symbols and numerals are appropriately transferred into the target text, target language text. And this has to be ensured by the vetter, or during the process of vetting, we have to see this. Facts, gaps, and figures, rechecking, retention of style, number, etc., as I mentioned. And then distinction between whole and part concept, that we will come to the next slide. Excuse me. This is a very important depiction here, that stages in vetting. There are two stages. One is the linguistic improvement, and then one is the conceptual improvement. So the process of carefully and critically examining something is a vetting. So I think we will discuss this. We will straight away go to now next slides, because we will have time left then for the discussion. Linguistic improvement. This is very important. Linguistic improvements are minor but very important, not just giving simple alternate. Generally, we say that once we transfer the text, it itself gets into the linguistic culture of the target language, but it doesn't happen. A minor syntactical displacement can be either miscommunicating or may not be acceptable in the target language linguistic sphere. So what other areas to be concerned about the linguistic improvement? That is appropriate selection of words, sentence structure, correct order. All these bring perfection to the target text. So we have to be very careful that the words that we use are acceptable to the target language, the linguistic sphere, sentence structure is appropriate, and the word order is correct. Then the removal of faults, avoidance of errors, and adding aesthetics to the text. This is also part of the linguistic improvement, which in Hindi we call it Bhashai Sanshodhan. Then the beautification of text, but also bringing the gaps and corrections of the error. So sometimes it may not seem very necessary, but at times it is very important to see that the aesthetics, the beauty of these, the created text should conform to the aesthetic elements that were there in the source language text. So these two texts should not be that way aesthetically very distinct. So because otherwise the purpose will be defeated. So please, next slide, please. Linguistic improvement, there are some considerations. Which are those considerations? Ensure grammatically correct usage and syntax. Proper order of clause and subclauses. Chronological presentation of the translator text. It has come to my, especially my observation that sometimes when we translate when we translate, then if we are not very careful, then we end up missing the chronological presentation of the target translator text in the target language. That means if we do not give a proper reading to the source language text and start translating forthwith, it often happens that the placement of the sentences is not correct. Then avoiding use of difficult words or cliches. It's our common habits that if we are acquainted with the language, then we use the cliches very often, whereas in the target language culture which is created for a person who is not familiar with the source language, we cannot use the cliches or the difficult words. That means, but it doesn't mean that we should only use very simple and the words which do not have the standards, but at the same time we should avoid that using the difficult words which are not easily understandable or comprehensible in the target language culture. Sometimes and the smoothness and lucidity in the target text. This is very important, and this is part of the linguistic improvement. And this has to be taken care by the vector. Language aesthetics and text embellishments. We always try to bring about the aesthetic into the target language. And how do we do it? We use different literary devices with the text, and then we try to put it as aesthetically as possible. Subject-specific language and words use, no gaps left. This is very important. Sometimes we know that if we talk about the technical terminology, if we talk about the functional use of language, then we know that if we talk about the registers of the functional language in different domains, there is one word but it will be giving different meanings in different functional areas. So we have to be very careful that we use the words appropriately for the target, for the area for which it has been used. We know that there are a lot of terms which are giving different meanings in common usage. When we use them in banking culture, they are giving different meanings. But there are certain words which are in legal terms, they do not give the same meaning. So we have to be careful about it. Please, next slide. Next slide, please. The second stage, one we discussed is the linguistic improvement. Another one is the conceptual improvement. This is very important, that the translator has to understand the source language text very carefully, but at the same time the vector should also read the source language text and create a complete conceptual clarity about the text. Only then one can do the justice while vetting the target text. So that means no ambiguity about the central or the main idea of the source text. to the translator or the vector. The concepts are fully expressed in the target text. The main idea is perfectly communicated. These are core areas of consideration, especially when we talk about the activity of the vetting. First one is the linguistic improvement, second is the conceptual improvement. So conceptual understanding will bring the perfection in the translation. Word selection and use is secondary. We know that, of course, we start with the linguistic activity, but our ultimate objective is to give a complete understanding of the source language text. Vector will sync with the translator and may interact for clarification. This can also happen. Next slide, please. These are the conceptual areas which brings a lot of improvement if they are given due consideration. First one is the hazy and doubtful concepts. Sometimes what happens that the translator is not very clear about the source language text and its deeper conceptual understanding. So there can be hazy and doubtful presentation. I mean, the concept is not fully clarified in the target language text, especially scientific text, social science texts, and also other may also happens in the humanities. Part concept, this is very important. Sometimes we understand part of the total concept and then the concept is not fully expressed in the target language. Whole concept, this is very important. What the translator should try and the vector should also look that the entire concept has been built perfectly in the target language text. Then the basic concept, part, whole and basic, these are three areas of the conceptual framework. So it is very important that we do understand, like for example, if we talk about the politics, there are different areas of the politics. But what is politics? That is very important. Maybe later on we understand Indian politics, British Parliament or the American democracy or whatever it is. But the basic understanding should be that what the concept is about. And then different sub-branches of it can be planted later on. So it is very important that we do understand the basic area of our dealing, and also then we understand it fully, not partly. And when we translate it as a whole. Concepts beyond doubt. Sometimes we know that there are concepts which are universally accepted. So we should not try to interpret them. The vector should see it that the universal concepts are transferred as it is. Next slide, please. So I think vetting versus evaluation we have already discussed. There is no need for it to repeat it. So then these are small tips. Just as we give some tips to the translator, there are few tips for the vetter also, the person who does the vetting. A vetter should be a well-read person, of course. One cannot be ignorant about the language and the text, so that I have not put into the slide. I've just put read the text carefully. This is very important, not only for the translator, but for the vetter as well. Reading translated or in context and for similarities or dissimilarities. This is very important. One should not read the text without context. This is important. What is the intention? What is the reader? What is the domain area of the text? What it is talking about? Why it is talking about? And at the same time, behind it, there is a creator of the text. We should also understand the writer or the author, and also look for the similarities and dissimilarities in the translated text, whether the translated text and the source text are put together. I think very good understanding, very good suggestions can be made if there are dissimilarities or for similarities. Understand the purpose of the source text and the need of the reader. This is very important. What reader wants to gain from the target translated text. Look for emotive meanings also, not just the literal meaning, but what is embedded deeper in the text that must also be properly deciphered and understood. Look for retention of style and explain gaps with footnotes. Translation is for non-native I already mentioned, it is non-native language user or speaker keep their needs in mind while evaluating the target text. Uh, Similarly, the last important caution for the or the maybe a clue or a tip for the veteran is that impartiality, patience, and deep reading. These three are very important. And should one act like as a custom officer, that means should critically examine and look for each and every detail of the target text, whether something is added, why it is added, whether something is removed, why it is removed, or if it is having an extra burden that should be removed. This is very important. And finally, I would like to add here that the vetting does not mean fault finding. As I mentioned during the process of the discussion, it is not for the fault finding, but it is for the improvement of the targeted text, which is a translated text in the target language.
So Jagdish sir, I really found your lecture enlightening, one of the good lectures, easily understandable and very clearly presented through the PPT. But this one thing which keeps on bothering me always, I'm a new translator, I'm new to the field. I have been doing it since 2 years now only. Mostly knowledge texts, but one thing keeps bothering me about translating knowledge texts, which is being there is a constant dichotomy when it comes to being faithful to the source language, because it is a knowledge text, and at the same time you have to be faithful to your readers who are reading it in the target language. So what kind of balance, how do we maintain this balance?
Sarvani, I understand your dichotomy very well, because in the knowledge text translation there are two aspects.
So
One is the knowledge aspect, another one is situating it into the target language
right,
readers or the target language linguistic sphere as well as its cultural sphere.
right,
As I mentioned that most of the knowledge concepts are universal and those are proven, so you cannot do much interpretation with them. But how to situate them? So there you can. It is very important that you be loyal. This is very important. We call the fidelity issue of fidelity. In translation, the issue of fidelity perhaps cannot be negotiated. But at the same time, you have to devise a mechanism as to how to express and present it in the target language culture. So most of the knowledge text translations happens for the specific purpose, for the knowledge purpose of the target reader or the target community.
yeah,
What you can do is that you can give this the basic concepts very with fidelity or quality. You do not play much with it, but at the same time try to relate it. What happens with the scientific or the scientific literature. Most of the concepts are universal, and those cannot be interpreted with. At the same time, you have to explain them. For example, if you talk about the Indian topography, Indian understanding of the science, then we have a very long tradition of scientific explorations and mathematics. The Jagdish Sharma, etc. So you can talk about the concept you are trying to translate, give an exact translation of it, and then try to relate it. So mostly the knowledge text translation, the act of relating is very important. That part can be handled by the translators locally. But at the same time, you have to be loyal to the basic knowledge, basic concepts.
so it is like a 50-50 loyalty that you have to
No, I don't mean 50-50. You see, the basic source text that in terms of its meaning that has to be translated as it is.
Okay.
You have to be loyal to that, because if the knowledge, if you deviate from the basic knowledge, then how can you create a similar or the version of it in the target text as a translated version? So what you do is you relate it. Relate is a secondary part. Give some examples that in our Indian, say for example, there, especially with the ORS, if you remember, उसमें हम कहते थे एक पिंच ऑफ सॉल्ट, चुटकी भर नमक.
Yes, sir.
हाँ, तो चुटकी भर नमक तो किसने नहीं कहा होगा ना. You see, they might have said 2 milligrams of salt, 2 milligrams of sugar, and sort of. So you go to that part and then say 2 milligrams, 2 milligrams, 2 milligrams, put together 6 milligrams, whatever it is. But you can then say that our Dadi and Nani also used to say chutki bhar namak. That means chutki. What do you mean by chutki? Chutki is a small amount of any commodity which is on the tip of the fingers. So you can use that metaphor also. But at the same time, you cannot deviate with the exact quantum quantity, because then the purpose will be defeated. If instead of 6 milligrams, you give the child 20 milligrams, then the serve is not translation. Or instead of 6 milligrams, you give 2 milligrams only. So this happens. I was transacting with a group of budding translators in Northeast. So उन्होंने कहा, सर एक आपने कहा एक प्याला, एक कटोरी. What is the size of the कटोरी? So in the literature created for the programs, and then say एक कटोरी आटा, एक कटोरी दाल, एक. Sir, what is the size of the कटोरी? So instead of saying, it should always translate that yes, 50 grams of dal, 50 grams of rice, or whatever it is. So the scientific measurements should not be translated, but you can then say that in our household we use small katori, which is usually 150 grams or 200 grams container. So you can use that as an example.
Sir, can we throw some light on how to choose a book for translation?
Sorry, could you repeat your answer, the question, please?
Yes, how to choose a book for translation? Can you throw some light on that?
How to choose a book for translation?
Yeah, if I want to go in for a translation,
Okay.
some book, then how I myself choose it? Like,
See, this is very complex question and difficult to answer, because first of all, it depends upon your own interest and area of understanding, which area you are proficient, perfect, or you understand well. So from that area you can understand. But at the same time, when you choose a text for translation, there are a lot of considerations. First of all, you have to see that you are comfortable with that area, you understand it well, and then you have to see in which language you are translating it into, whether you are conversant with that language. It is very important that not only your proficiency with the source language text or the text you understand well, but the language in which you are translating it is more importantly considered a vital area. Because when you translate it, you are comfortable with the basic understanding of the source language text. But when you translate it into alien language, or the second or the other, what translation is also called an act of othering in other language, then you should be very, very clear, very good authority over that language. Not only language, its linguistic culture is one thing, but its social culture is very important. Sometimes we can read or we can understand the language, other language, of course, I am talking which you intend translating into, but sometimes we do not understand its deeper social concerns. Look for Indian systems. Uncle and aunt can find 10 different connotations in our kinship terminology. So if an English speaker thinks that, okay, Chacha Chachi is enough,
Yes,
and,
we have Chacha Chachi, Mama Mami.
and
Like
when
that.
an English knowing person comes to Hindi, or more importantly Indian languages, he fails to understand what is this Pufa Pufi, what is this Devo, Jethani, Bhabi, Nanad.
We have different names for each relation.
So that is why I am saying that while translating, while deciding for translation, first of all, you must you have to be very deeply involved with your own language, but at the same time, the language which you intend to translate into, that is very important, that you are proficient in it with its linguistic and social culture. So then you decide, and once you are there with these qualities, and then second thing comes whether you are comfortable with poetry or you are comfortable with prose, whether you are comfortable with the knowledge text translation, fiction, media writing. Those are other considerations for the choice of your selection.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sometimes, I feel that, books select us, and sometimes we select books.
Very important, sir.
Yeah. And if you are translating for an organization, for an
Yes.
association, then you don't have any choice. They
You
will
don't have a
assign
choice
you
there.
it.
You don't have a choice. Very,
Yeah.
very appropriate, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think, yeah, we are running short of time now. Do we have any question? We will be writing to sir then if we have any other question. Okay. So thank you so much, sir. On behalf of National Translation Mission, CIIL, and Rama Devi Women University, we thank you very much for this enlightening lecture on translation evaluation. And rarely actually we heard on translation evaluation in translation training program. And actually, as you rightly pointed out, translation evaluation has to be a topic, and that has to be thrust open in any kind of translation training program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
I hope we can interact further on this issue, and
Yes,
there
sir.
have been very useful topics in your.
Yes,
but
sir.
I thought since some of them might be the practitioners,
Sir.
so before they decide that my translation is final, I
Yeah,
just
right.
give them a caution that
Right.
you go through this stage also, or take
Yes, sir.
help of your friend, so
Yeah.
that your translation is acceptable and perfect.
Yes, sir. You have rightly said, translation is never perfect, It
Thank
is
you very
always in progressing stage. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And this area actually, translation evaluation, is not much touched open. People have been translating, but the review, the evaluation,
Yes,
these parts actually in India also, the things are not much on evaluation. And
no,
this
once
is
we decide to, at least from our own side that yes, my translation process is complete,
sir.
then some people just translate and leave it. They don't go through it. Most of our students do the same thing.
Sir.
So we always tell them, whatever you write, please read it once again,
Sir.
and show it to your friends. How do they read it?
Sir.
So if the third person reads it and say no, it is communicating, it reads through, then you can say yes, some perfection is there.
Right. Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.